All right, so let's get real for a second. Most leadership advice you've been given is absolutely useless in tech teams. That's right. So, all those fancy books, the TED Talks, the motivational seminars, they weren't built for tech teams. And if you've ever felt like nothing really sticks, it's not really your fault. It's because you've been using a broken system. So, today, I'm going to break down exactly why traditional leadership strategies fail when applied to tech teams, the most common mistakes tech leaders make, and what a better approach looks like. But I'm not just going to throw theories at you. I'm going to give you real practical insights that you can apply immediately. And stick with me to the end because I'm going to be sharing how you can take the next step in fixing your leadership approach, whether that's through coaching, community, or even just a fresh way of thinking. I guarantee you're going to leave this session with a brand new perspective on leading tech teams. So let's dive in. First up, why does traditional tech leadership advice fail? So let's get into this. Why does traditional tech leadership advice fail so badly in tech teams? If you've ever felt like you're following the quote, right leadership principles, but your team is still chaotic, disengaged, or just plain slow, congratulations. You're not crazy. You're just stuck using the wrong playbook. Now, the first reason, leadership books aren't written for tech teams. Pick up any best-selling leadership book and you'll see the same themes. Set the vision, be inspirational, have clear org charts and structured reporting. Now, does any of that sound like it applies to a fast-moving tech team? Tech teams don't operate like traditional companies. In most industries, projects follow a linear process. You do X, then Y, then Z. But in tech, it's more like X, then Y. And oh, wait, there's a new API update that just broke everything. I remember a time when I worked with a CTO who had spent his entire career in manufacturing before moving into software. Now, he came in guns blazing, ready to optimize workflows like he'd done in factories. His big idea, a rigid approval process for every feature. Does that sound familiar? So does that sound familiar to you? It's just what happens in tech teams. So what happened with our CTO? Well, we're about to find out. So like I said, he had spent his entire career in manufacturing before moving into software. Like I said, he came in ready to optimize all the workflows like he had done in the factories. The result of his rigid approval process for every new feature, developers were spending more time filling out paperwork than writing code. The team's output dropped. Frustration skyrocketed, and within 6 months, the best engineers were already looking for new jobs. But why? Because he was applying a structured linear leadership model to an industry that thrives on iteration and adaptability. The reality is that leadership books teach hierarchy, process, and control. Tech teams thrive on collaboration, speed, and iteration. Traditional leadership assumes slow decision making is good. Tech teams need fast iteration cycles. So if you're trying to apply old school corporate leadership methods to a software team, it's like trying to run a Formula One car on a horse and buggy manual. It's just not built for the speed and complexity of what you're doing. Now, the second reason, command and control leadership is dead. A lot of leadership advice is built on this old school belief that leaders need to control every decision. Now, that might have worked in the 1950s, but in tech, that's a total disaster. And let me tell you about a CEO I worked with. He came from a finance background where everything was spreadsheet driven, highly structured, and top down. His philosophy was if I don't approve it, it just doesn't happen. That meant no feature was built, no process was changed, and no tool was implemented unless he previously signed off. So what happened? Teams stopped making decisions on their own because they didn't want to step on his toes. All the projects slowed down because his approvals became a bottleneck. The most talented people left because they didn't feel trusted. Now, the thing about tech teams is they don't need a dictator, they need a navigator. Command and control leadership slows everything down because every decision has to go through you. And guess what? If you're making every decision, you're the reason your company is moving like a snail. Now, the reality here, engineers, designers, and product managers, they thrive on autonomy. Bottlenecking decisions at the top kills speed and innovation. The best tech leaders set the direction and get out of the way. The future of leadership isn't about control. It's about enabling your team to make decisions without you. And that's a big shift that most traditional leadership advice just doesn't prepare you for. Reason number 3 is the open door policy myth. Let's talk about this. It's one of the biggest lies in leadership. It's the open door policy. And that's the idea that as long as you're approachable, your team will magically come to you with every problem. Let me ask you, when's the last time someone actually walked into your office and said, "Hey, boss, I need help"? Yeah, exactly. It doesn't happen. And it's not because your team doesn't have problems. It's because people don't want to look weak. They don't want to be seen as the person who can't handle their work. So instead of bringing you their struggles, they keep quiet. And by the time you realize something's wrong, it's already a full-blown fire. Now, this one time I worked with a VP of engineering who swore by his open door policy. He was convinced his team would just come to him with any issues. One day, a major back-end system crashed. A junior engineer had known for weeks that there was a potential issue, but he was too scared to bring it up because, in his words, "I don't want to bother anyone with something I thought I could fix myself." The result, a full week of downtime and thousands of dollars lost. So much for that open door policy. The reality is that people don't naturally ask for help. They fear looking incompetent. A real leader doesn't just wait for problems. They create structures where issues surface naturally. Great leaders, they don't rely on people coming to them. They proactively create systems where transparency is built into the process. And that's what a lot of traditional leadership advice completely ignores. Now, reason number 4, one-size-fits-all leadership does not work in tech. Engineers, designers, and product managers all think and work differently. They have different motivators, different communication styles, different metrics for success. Now, if you try to apply that same leadership approach to all of them, you're going to fail someone. I worked once in a startup where the CEO had a marketing background. He loved high-energy meetings, brainstorming sessions, and rapid decision-making. But his engineering team, they were quiet and analytical and needed deep focus time to do their best work. He kept running these all hands-on ideation sessions, thinking that it would energize everyone, but instead his engineers were losing their minds. Productivity tanked because he was treating his engineers like marketers and pushing them into a leadership model that didn't match how they worked. Engineers need deep focus time. Constant meetings drain them. Designers thrive on collaboration. They need feedback loops. Product managers work in ambiguity. They need adaptable leadership. Best tech leaders don't lead everyone the same way. They adapt. They understand that different functions need different leadership styles. That's why a one-size-fits-all leadership model, it's a recipe for failure. So let's recap. Traditional leadership advice fails in tech because leadership books are written for corporate hierarchies, not fast-moving teams. Command and control leadership slows everything down. Open door policies don't work because people are afraid to admit their problems, and a single leadership style, it's not going to work across engineering, design, and products. So if you've been feeling like leadership advice doesn't quite fit your tech team, that's because you've been trying to use a broken model. But I'm here to suggest a better way. Let's talk about the biggest mistakes tech leaders make and how to fix them. So here, we're going to talk about 5 mistakes that y'all make. Number 1, micromanaging everything. Now tell me if this sounds familiar. You're constantly checking in on your team, hovering over their shoulders, reviewing every line of code, every slide deck. Because if you don't, something might go wrong, right? Well, that's wrong. Micromanaging doesn't just kill productivity, it kills motivation. Your team's going to either check out or just wait for you to make every decision for them. And either way, you are the bottleneck. I once worked with a CTO at a mid-sized tech company who was known for his hands-on approach. Sounds great in theory, but his version of hands-on meant reviewing every pull request himself, rejecting code over minor style preferences, and insisting on being involved in every product decision. Developers just stopped making proactive choices. They just waited for him to weigh in. Productivity slowed, morale tanked, and the best engineers, they left because they felt suffocated. The entire leadership realized what was happening, but the damage was already done. You got to shift from control to oversight, set clear expectations, provide guidance, then let your team do the work. You can't trust the people you hired, then that's a management problem. You got to create guardrails, not roadblocks. Otherwise, you're slowing your company down. Now, mistake number 2 is relying on endless meetings. Ever feel like your entire day is just bouncing from one meeting to the next, and at the end of it, nothing actually gets done? Well, meetings have become a crutch for bad leadership. Instead of solving problems, we schedule a meeting about it. Instead of making a decision, we create a committee. Leaders who rely too much on meetings are just avoiding real leadership. I once consulted for a SaaS company that had weekly alignment meetings. They lasted 90 minutes, the same status updates, the same discussions, but no real decisions were getting made. One day I asked the team, what would happen if we cut this meeting down to 15 minutes? The CEO laughed. But when we actually tried it with async updates and status checks, these meetings went from being blockers to decision makers, and productivity skyrocketed. So use meetings for strategic alignments, not updates. Use async communication. Not everything that has a clear outcome, then get one. Can this be solved in a document or a Slack thread? If yes, cancel the meeting. Don't have those meetings. Now, mistake number 3, focusing on individual performance over team dynamics. Tech leaders love to celebrate the 10x engineer, that lone genius who works insane hours and cranks out brilliant code. But here's the truth. His success is a team sport. If you prioritize that over team collaboration, you've set yourself up for disaster. I worked with a company who had a superstar engineer. He was so talented, but he didn't document anything, and he hated working with other people. Leadership protected him, though, because he was too valuable to leave. When he quit, the company was left scrambling. Nobody understood his code. It just, what should have taken a week took 3 months to transition. Reward teamwork, people, not just individual output. A high-performing team beats a few star players every single time. Stop glorifying that hero developer and start recognizing those who uplift the team, because as a leader, it's your job to build a system that makes collaboration easily. Now, mistake number 4 is ignoring psychological safety. If your team is afraid to speak up, afraid to fail, or afraid to take risks, they'll never innovate, period. Psychological safety isn't just some fluffy HR concept. It's the foundation of high-performance teams. At a previous company, I witnessed a PM openly criticize a junior developer in a meeting, saying their idea was stupid. You could feel the energy shift. Nobody wanted to speak up after that. It only took that one instance of public shaming to create a culture where people were too afraid to contribute. The company suffered because the best ideas never made it to the table. Leaders need to create an environment where people feel safe making mistakes. If failure is punished, progress stops. The best companies have postmortems, not blame sessions. When something goes wrong, ask, what can we learn from this instead of who screwed up? Create an environment where people feel safe to experiment, and your team's going to move faster. Now, mistake number 5, expecting high performance without clear accountability. This is one of the biggest mistakes leaders make, and it's assuming their team knows what's expected of them. Vague goals, they lead to vague results. If you want your team to perform, they need clarity. I once worked with a startup CEO who kept telling his engineers, we need to move faster. But when I asked what faster meant, he didn't have an answer. Here we were talking about shipping features, improving sprint velocity, reducing bug counts. No, nobody knew. When we got specific and we set measurable targets and we defined what success was like, the team went in the right direction and performance improved. Now that's where my PACE system comes in. Purposeful alignment, agile collaboration, clear accountability, and effective communication. It just works. You're the leader. You need to make it work. So why are these mistakes holding you back? Well, if you're making these 5 mistakes, you're not just hurting your team, you're hurting your company. So let's recap. Micromanaging everything kills productivity and motivation. Shift from control to oversight. Relying on endless meetings wastes time and slows progress. Use async communication whenever possible. Focusing on individual performance over team dynamics. The best teams win, not the best individuals. Build collaboration, not lone wolves. Ignoring psychological safety. If people don't feel safe to fail, they won't innovate. Create a blame-free culture. Expecting high performance without clear accountability. You can't hit goals that you can't see, and neither can your team. Be crystal clear about your expectations. So now that we've covered the biggest leadership mistakes, let's talk about what does work. All right. So we've spent a bunch of time tearing apart all the bad leadership advice and the most common mistakes that are holding tech leaders back. So now let's talk what really works, because if we're going to reject the old ways, we need a new way, one that actually fits the way modern teams operate. The problem with traditional leadership in tech is that it's based on a world that no longer exists. It assumes a top-down structure where the leader makes all the big decisions, delegates tasks in a linear fashion, and holds authority over every process. Now, this might work in manufacturing or finance, but in a fast-moving tech team, it's a disaster. Think about the last time your team had to pivot. Maybe your product roadmap changed because a competitor launched a new feature. Maybe your infrastructure team found a bottleneck that required re-architecting part of your system. Maybe your marketing team needed an immediate integration to capitalize on viral campaigns. These aren't linear, predictable problems. They require rapid decision-making, flexibility, and team-wide ownership. So what's the alternative? Enter decentralized leadership. Here's where things get interesting. Instead of a top-down command and control model, modern tech teams thrive in a decentralized leadership model, a system where decision-making is distributed, accountability is clear, and the team is empowered to solve problems without waiting for approvals at every step. Sounds a little vague, so let's break it down a little bit. There are 3 core principles of decentralized leadership. Principle 1 is that leaders set direction, teams own execution. A great leader's job is not to micromanage the work. It's to set the vision, provide the resources, and then get the hell out of the way so the team can execute. I worked with a CTO who was constantly frustrated with his engineering team. He'd tell them, we need to improve system performance. And then he'd spend his time reviewing every ticket, questioning every architecture decision, and acting as a bottleneck. As a result, his team was afraid to make decisions without his approval, progress slowed, and innovation stalled. Now compare that to another tech leader I know. He was a VP of engineering at a fast-growing SaaS company. They took a different approach. Instead of micromanaging, she made sure every team understood the overall mission. We need to reduce page load times by 40%. Then she'd let them figure out how to achieve it. The teams experimented, tested different solutions, and ended up delivering a 60% performance improvement. That's decentralized leadership. Set the goal, give your team ownership, and trust them to get it done. Now, principle 2, decision-making moves to the people closest to the work. One of the biggest flaws in traditional leadership is that decisions are made too high up the chain. The higher you go, the further you are from the real problem. The best companies shift decision-making power to the people actually doing the work. A few years ago, I worked for a product team that was launching a critical feature. Every UX decision had to go through a senior VP who was 2 levels removed from the product team. He had good intentions. He wanted to keep things aligned, but the reality was that every decision took days or even weeks. Meanwhile, their competitor, who had empowered their product team to make real-time decisions, released a similar feature 3 months faster. The difference? Decentralized leadership. The competitor trusted their own team in the process, and while a slow-moving company got stuck in a bureaucratic approval loop. So how do you apply this? You create frameworks for decision-making, not bottlenecks. Instead of requiring approvals for every step, you set clear guidelines. Things like anything affecting system security must be reviewed by the security team, but UI/UX changes can be implemented at the product team's discretion. You create a structure where decisions happen fast, but still within guardrails that protect the business. Principle 3, accountability is built through clarity, not control. Leaders often confuse accountability with control. They think that if they aren't constantly checking in, people will slack off, and that's just not true. I had a coaching client who was a startup CEO who told me, I feel like my team just doesn't care as much as I do. So I asked him, what's their definition of success? He paused, and then I asked, what are they accountable for? He mumbled something vague, and that was the issue. His team wasn't slacking off. They just didn't know what winning looked like. True accountability isn't about breathing down someone's neck. It's about making success crystal clear. That's why decentralized leadership doesn't mean do whatever you want. It means make sure every member understands exactly what they're responsible for and what outcomes they're driving. So let's talk a little bit about the PACE system. It may sound great in theory, but how do you actually implement it? How do you structure a team where everyone knows what to do, who owns what, and how decisions get made without constant oversight? Well, that's exactly why I developed the PACE system, a framework for making decentralized leadership work without chaos. There are 4 pillars: purposeful alignment, ensuring that everyone is working towards the same goals without confusion; agile collaboration, building workflows that keep teams moving fast without bottlenecks; clear accountability, defining ownership so nothing falls through the cracks; effective communication, structuring communication so decisions get made without endless meetings. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into all 4 right now, but if you're curious about how this works, I'm going to be hosting a session soon where I'll break it all down in detail. Stick around and I'll share how you can be part of that. So, why is decentralized leadership the future in my mind? Well, I think that the old way of leading tech teams, where everything runs through a few key leaders, it's dead. The best tech companies are moving to decentralized models where teams own their own work. Decisions happen fast, and accountability, it's built into the system, not enforced through micromanagement. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Stop being the bottleneck. Lead with direction, not control. Push decision making to the people doing the work. They have the best information. Create clarity, not more oversight. Make sure that your team knows exactly what success looks like. If you're serious about leading this way, stick around because I'm going to share with you a way to get a deeper understanding of this methodology and apply it to your team right away. So it's about trusting your team, really. I mean, that's what PACE is all about. And, we've covered a lot today. We talked about why traditional leadership fails. We've talked about the biggest mistakes holding tech leaders back. And we've given you a foundation for a new approach, decentralized leadership. But here's the truth. You can't just watch a video, nod along, and expect your team to transform overnight. You need ongoing support, guidance, and a network of other forward-thinking leaders who are applying these principles in real time. It's why I created the Executive Tech Alliance. It's not just another online group. It's a private community built specifically for technology executives, engineering leaders, and founders who want high-performing decentralized teams without burnout, bottlenecks, or chaos. Inside, you're going to get exclusive insights and leadership tactics that I don't share anywhere else. Live strategy sessions where I help you solve real-world team challenges. A network of like-minded tech leaders who are implementing decentralized leadership in their companies. You also are going to get early access to my upcoming virtual mastermind class, and we'll have more on that in a moment. Now, the best part, you can join today and start applying these principles immediately. Go to toptiercoachingservices.com/community or DM me on LinkedIn the word executive, and I'll send you the details. Now, some of you are ready to go even deeper. You don't want just leadership advice. You want a step-by-step roadmap to transform your team and start seeing results now. That's why I'm putting together something huge, a virtual mastermind class where I'll be personally walking a select group of leaders through the decentralized A-team method, breaking down every piece of the framework in detail and showing you exactly how to implement it in your company. This is going to be an invite-only experience, and the first group will get direct coaching from me. If that sounds like something you want to be a part of, joining the Tech Alliance is the best way to make sure you're first in line when we open applications. So here's your next step. Join the Executive Tech Alliance today, toptiercoachingservices.com/community. Stay tuned for details on the virtual mastermind class. Members are going to get early access. Tech leadership is changing, folks. The question is, are you ready to change with it? Head on over to toptiercoachingservices.com/community and take the first step toward building a high-performance, decentralized team. Not only will your boss thank you, your team's going to thank you, your significant other is going to thank you, and if you have children, they're going to thank you too, because they're going to get to see their mom or their dad, whichever you are, way more often when you implement decentralized leadership. Thanks a lot for listening, and hope you come back for the next one.